Hello and welcome to Runtusters. My name's Nick, and today we have something a little bit different from our usual reviews. We're going to each be running through the shoes that we use to set our PBs in. Generally we're talking about from 5k to the marathon, but there might be some other different PBs in there as well, especially from Kieran, who's obviously done some very long events like 100 milers. This is an idea I saw Alex Felitti of Meta Endurance do, so I want to give him a bit of credit and say go like, follow, watch his video first, because I have looked at this idea from him. But definitely a fun video to do, I think. Some cases it'll be a bit of a trip back into the past when we were last setting PBs at certain distances, but some are obviously more up to date and does look through the last few years of running shoes, which has been pretty crazy in terms of the development of carbon plate racing shoes and how early on it was very different. I think if we'd done this video 5 years ago, nearly all of the PBs for all of us would be in some kind of Vaporfly or something like that, but now much more level playing field. Lots of brands have really excellent shoes out there, and we've used a nice variety of them to set PBs. So we're each going to talk through those PBs like I mentioned. Let's have a look at them.
Okay, so this was a bit of a depressing video for me to do because I haven't got any PBs for quite a while. It's been a couple of years since I got a PB. I went through a period when I was doing a lot of, a couple of the big major marathons, and I was picking up PBs quite a lot because I was training really, really hard for those marathons, and I was just getting fitter and faster. But for the last 2 years, I haven't really got any PBs over any distance. Hopefully I'm going to be able to claw back some 5k and 10k PBs this year. Definitely not going to get any marathon PBs for a while, or maybe half marathons, because I just haven't been doing the endurance work. But I still seem to be holding on to the speed I've got, so I'm not far off getting PBs in 5k and 10k distances. So I was a bit worried when Nick suggested doing this video, because a lot of my PBs are from a while ago, and I wasn't sure if I still had the shoes, and I wasn't sure if I'd even remember what shoes I wore, but I was reminded when I went through Instagram which ones I wore for those various races. And luckily, there's only 3 shoes I've used for all of my PBs, so it's going to make life a bit easier to go through on this video. So I'll go through it by shoe. So the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3, I talked about this shoe absolutely loads when it came out. For about a year, I used it for so many races. I used it for 2 major marathons, by far my fastest marathons. I used it for pretty much every distance, and I did a video on the channel back then on how many PBs I'd got in this shoe. Absolutely loved it. It's just comfortable, natural, nice bit of bounce in it. It just seemed to work perfectly for me. I actually need to try it again and see if it's still got the same magic that I had from that year when I was using it quite a lot. But the races that I got PBs in this shoe were the 5k Regent's Park LGN advertising race, and that was 18 minutes and 18 seconds. That was back in 2022, and that was a really big PB for me. That was just probably about a quarter of the way into training for Chicago Marathon. The next time I used it was in my home village, Heckington. They have a 10-mile road race, and I got 1 hour 4 in that race. I remember at the time I raced that. I used to race that race every year, and I got a massive PB in that race at the time. I wasn't expecting it at all, because I wasn't that fit at the time. And I used the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3 for it and absolutely loved it. The biggest things that I've used this for, or the biggest race, is Berlin. So in Berlin in 2023, I got my marathon PB of 2:53, which was a year after getting Chicago time of 2:55. And I wasn't expecting that. 2:53 is a time that I thought I'd never ever get close to. I used to sit around 3:30 for marathons, and then I put a lot of effort into training, and managed to get it, and that got me my qualifying time for Boston. So I used this for Chicago and Berlin, and just loved it. I couldn't find anything wrong with the shoe. Just felt comfortable, really natural to run in. Didn't have any issues with discomfort. It felt relatively stable on the run. It was just perfect for all of that. And I've absolutely loved it for those races. Haven't used it for a marathon since. I think I do need to pick it up for another marathon, see if it still works as well for me. My other big shoe that I use for a lot for races, which I talk about a lot on the channel, is the original Alpha Fly. I still think this is the best Alpha Fly. Better than the 3. I haven't tried the 2. So this I have used for my 10k PB, and that was at the Hove Prom 10k in 2023, and that was 37 minutes and 33 seconds. And that came after doing Berlin Marathon, and I was pretty fit at that time, and I was really surprised. I thought I was going to get about 39 minutes, so getting that time was really big. It knocked off about 40 seconds off my PB, so I was really, really pleased, and I used the original Alpha Fly for that. And I also used it for my parkrun PB. So my parkrun PB is a bit faster than my 5k PB because I do parkruns every week. I've not done an actual 5k race for a very long time. And that was 17:59 at the Hove Prom 5k, which is a very fast parkrun we have down in Brighton, and that was in 2023, again just after I'd done Berlin Marathon. So my last shoe is a bit of a funny one. I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with this shoe, and I don't really use it a lot. I very rarely used it at the time, and that's just because it's a bit of an odd shoe. It's the original Saucony Endorphin Elite. It's very, very aggressive. It doesn't feel very comfy to run in. I find it sort of forces my foot into a position that is very fast, but it's just not very comfortable. When I ran the Brighton Half Marathon in 2023, I remember I got to about 15k and my feet just felt like they were really bending out of shape, and I wasn't really enjoying it. I felt fast, but it was not a nice last 6 kilometers running in this shoe. So that was in 2023, and that was 1 hour and 22 minutes, which was mad because that was quite a while after doing Chicago, and I'd basically stopped training after Chicago and had a rest for 2 or 3 months and just did a bit, just sort of ticking over the miles. So I was not expecting anywhere near that. My previous time was 1:23, and that was just before doing Chicago, so I was in my prime then. This was after Christmas, and I'd not really done a lot of training. So the Endorphin Elite, Saucony Endorphin Elite, amazing shoe, really, really propulsive, really fast, but I don't use it very often just because I don't find it very comfortable. Really want to get hold of the 2 so I can see how that fares. I know it's very different to this shoe.
Well, this is fun, isn't it? Get to take a little walk down memory lane and go through some PBs and some shoes past and present. I'm going to kick it off though with the most recent one actually, my 5k PB set back in March. On March 15th at the new college cycle track in Leicester as part of the Podium 5k. Unfortunately, there are not great connotations to do with that race series now, but I will leave that one with you. But I set 19-second PB there, 18:40 in the Hoka Cielo X1 2.0. These bad boys, which you can also see behind me, with their lovely little sparkly sheen and their Go Fastest stripes and their super aggressive cutaway. 7mm drop, about 228 grams, and a very aggressive Meta Rocker and 2 layers of Piba midsole foam and super bouncy. And I'll be honest, this is probably the one that I attest most to the shoes. I had no right to run that fast. I know in the scheme of things, probably not that fast, but compared to where I should be, given my marathon PBs and things like that, I should be a lot faster. And I just struggle with 5Ks. They're my nemesis. And I'd done a marathon 3 weeks before, off kind of not much training, 3:07, in the Nova Blast, sorry. And then went into that, and it was just a case of like, how much speed do you have? Had a rubbish warm up, rubbish day. I mean, the conditions were great, but those shoes absolutely boosted me round, and they were so much fun. And if I could get them in half a size bigger in time, I would wear them for a marathon. But I can't, and I just feel like they're going to be a bit too snug, which is why I didn't wear them for a half marathon. But we'll come on to that later. So Hoka Cielo X1 2.0 5k PB, Bosch. So now I'm going to come on to, for me, the most controversial one. So this is my 10k PB set about 2 years ago. So similar date, 18th of March, but 2023, 38:12 at Kirby Mallory Motorsport Racetrack in an ATW event. Apparently, I like laps of racetracks. I do actually like laps of racetracks. This one's a motorsport one. And I set it in the Mizuno Wave Rebellion Pro, which interestingly has a not dissimilar cutaway to the Hoka Cielo X1 2.0. It was rainy laps. I was very nervous. My coach told me to go out in 5k PB time and then just hang on for dear life. And I was in the middle of marathon training. I was in amazing shape, been testing loads of shoes. And incidentally, 38:12 for that 10k relatively flat multi-lap course. The very next day, I put on a brand new pair of Nike Vaporfly 3s and ran the exact same time over 6 miles on a hilly course, which was very interesting. I then got injured a day later when I was running reps and tore my plantar, which I've gone on about multiple times. You don't need to hear about that again, but very interesting. And I think switching between lots of different carbon plate shoes maybe could have factored into that, not sure. But these certainly were a lot of fun to run in. and upwards to half marathons. I came very close to setting a new half marathon PB the other weekend in Berlin half marathon wearing the Adidas Adios Adizero Pro 4, mouthful, but 5 seconds off, so it does not count. But if you want to know more about that, then go and watch the video on the channel, which is a few weeks ago. But my PB was set in 2022, 17th September, 84 minutes flat. You guessed it, running laps, but this time not round a racing circuit, but around a reservoir. It was Draycote Water Running Festival. It's actually quite undulating. It was quite windy, so it's probably worth a bit more than that, if I'm honest. But it was a run-through event, and I was wearing the Nike Zoom X Vaporfly Next Percent in the beautiful Ekiden orange colourway, which actually was discount when I bought it, and I love it. I think it's great. And it was, if you think about it, I think the Next Percent 2 was a step up. They come up with these sort of wiggly laces that really stayed tied up really well. The upper had kind of gone from that kind of sailing material to the kind of much more knitted, and they're just a really great solid shoe. Now, I'm a heel striker, you can see here that they do wear away, and that's always the problem with these ones, isn't it? Because unless you are, perfect 4-foot striker, or you strike in exactly the same place, then it's always going to have that. But 187 grams, I think it's one of the lightest ones that out of all of my PB shoes. 8mm drop, so quite an aggressive drop. I don't think it feels as aggressive as something like the Hoka, but nevertheless, I think, compared to a lot of shoes now, these feel pretty normal. But I still think they're a great shoe, and I would still happily put this on and race in it. In fact, I'm seriously considering it for London Marathon this year. On to the big one then. Marathon PB. This is my only non-carbon plate PB, and it's an old long-standing PB. I set it in 2016 before I'd had any children at Florence Marathon in November 2016. It was 2:53:22, and it's still one of the runs I'm most proud of. I just went for it. 5th marathon of the year that year, and last of running 3 in 3 months. I did Berlin, Lake Garda, and then Florence. All of them were sub 3, and I wore the Adidas Adizero Adios Boost 2. There we go, nice long name. So it was back in the day when we wore racing flats, and the reviews at the time said it was expensive for a racing shoe due to the Boost foam. I don't think people would find it expensive now. It was 227 grams compared to 201 grams for the Adios Pro 4 now, so obviously a bit more, but actually not that dissimilar to a lot of the ones behind me that I've been talking about today. Fueling before the night before for that race, I think, was a slice of pizza from a hole in the wall place in Florence and half a leftover panettone from the Airbnb. So it was not pro fueling by any stretch. I was running 100-mile a weeks, mainly run commuting, but my half marathon pace was still 85 minutes. I couldn't get under 20 minutes for 5k, and I couldn't get under 40 for 10k. So it was all a bit nuts, really. But that shoe, it was a great shoe. I mean, in the scheme of things, when there weren't any carbon plate shoes, it was just a great racer, I thought. Looking back now, I ran like 900 miles in it before I retired it. I ran so many marathons in that shoe, and it just didn't have any problems for me. I know some of the reviews said it was really too thin in the toe box, or that it needed a long time to break in. I guess I broke it in over 900 miles, but I mean, I didn't have loads of shoes back then, and I bought it mainly because loads of other people were buying them, and it wasn't that expensive, I thought, actually. And it's just a fantastic racer, and, all the top runners at the time were wearing them, so I guess I was being influenced back in the day before influencing was really a thing. However, I am going to come on to another carbon plate shoe, which is, let me just find it, this one. This is, as you might realise, the Vaporfly Next Percent. So it was the one after the 4%, and it had this weird kind of, it feels like you could make sails out of it, windsurf sails kind of material. It still had the wonky lacing, but it didn't have the kind of wriggly laces that they brought in for the second iteration. And I ran 3 seconds, sorry, off my marathon PB in 2020, straight out of COVID, one of those first races back. So that was kind of the closest I've got since having kids. Guess what? 10 laps of a race circuit. Yes, it was Alton Park MotoGP race circuit, which again is quite up and downy. Racing in what I called at the time the moon boot ugly shoes, and actually a lot of the reviews said these look ridiculous, which I think is just hilarious. Puma, I'm looking at you like these do not look ridiculous anymore, do they? And I remember, you know, any of these carbon plate shoes when they first came out, they were over 100 quid, and it just seemed absolutely nuts to be spending that kind of money. And now, you know, can easily end up paying £200 for a pair of shoes, which is kind of bonkers. But yeah, so I would kind of love to go back and try and set a PB in a non-carbon shoe, but I'm not going to, am I? The closest I've got to it is running 307 in Seville in the Nova Blast just for fun, and that was kind of satisfying to do. But yeah, the Adidas Adizero Adios Boost 2 still hold a special place in my heart, especially the purple ones. And finally, you thought you got the end, didn't you? But no, I've run a 50 miler a couple of times. So I have a 50 mile PB, which is 7:53:18, set on the 18th of May 2019. I came third in the North Downs Way 50 miler, and I wore the Nike Pegasus 33. It was one of my first races back after having kids, actually. 1 year and 3 months, I think it was. My child was at the time, and it was a fantastic race. And I would have been second if I hadn't got lost. But that is the problem with being rubbish at navigating when you're trying to do ultras. That's part of the bag. They were the perfect shoe for it. It was dry and dusty. The North Downs Way is kind of rocky in places, but there's also some tarmac. In fact, the worst bit was the gravel, and those pegs, gosh, I love those shoes. So I will prove to you how much I used to love Nike Pegasus. So I have framed the old tongues from my Nike Pegasus 31 and the Nike Pegasus 30 as well here, and alas I don't have the 33s, but there we go. They had the extra kind of Zoom air foam under the forefoot and the flywire cables on that particular edition, which was just a little bit of a level up, but they didn't kind of do anything too crazy with them. They didn't go too hard or anything like that, and they were just brilliant shoes. And I wish you could still get a Pegasus that was like that. I'm also going to give an honourable mention to, again, another one that I saved because I love it so much, the Asics Gel DS, which was my first kind of racer training shoe, and also the Asics Gel Nimbus, a very old version, I can't remember which was my first sub 3 attempt. And then I've only recently gone back to running in Asics. So there we go. That is my PB rundown and some honourable mentions. Well done for hanging on in there.
Now, before we get into any of the shoes, I'm going to say this. I don't believe that shoes make the PB. The training does. It's a hill I'm willing to die on. I don't put any of the PBs that I'm going to talk about here specifically down to my choice of shoe on that day. I do believe that I'd have been in condition no matter what shoes I ran in. Now, I think the shoes can help you unleash the benefits of the work that you put in, but they can't magically make up for a lack of conditioning. So with that as a big caveat, let's get into my PB shoes. So for my PB shoes, there's one shoe that looms really large because I used this last year to bust a couple of big PBs in the space of a few months, and that is the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris. Loads of videos on the channel. You'll know how much I love this shoe from how often I've talked about it. Now, I set a new marathon PB at the Manchester Marathon in this shoe where I ran 2:54:40. Then 6 days later, I ran my best ever 5k PB at the Asics Podium 5k in Dulwich. It was around this time last year as well where I ran 17:59. Now for me, the Metaspeed Sky Paris was one of 2024's standout shoes. I think it's still among the best carbon race shoes going. It's got all of the ingredients that I look for in a good carbon race shoe, and it really helped me to smash those times. It also comes in at a pretty competitive price, so it's one so I think it's still really interesting to look at. What you've got is this light, racy, airy uppers, big stack of really bouncy, energetic midsole foam, and a stiffness from the carbon plate that adds plenty of extra pop. I think it delivers everything you're really looking for when you want to lace up a speedy shoe and go hunting. I really like the stiffness in the midsole. That's something that I like, where you get a bit of stiffness and a bit of snap. So it's not just about the bounce. I think you get just right kind of cushioning in this that dampens enough of the road impact without leaving you feeling completely disconnected from the road. I still want to feel a bit of the road when I'm pushing hard. Now, I always said in some ways that it sort of reminded me a little bit of the Nike Vaporfly Next Percent 2 for that, and it's got really good precision to the landings. I think it's wonderfully agile. It was absolutely perfect on the flat, smooth, looped circuit that I did for the 5k, which was basically around Dulwich Park, which is really easy, nice clear running. Gave me all the efficiency I needed battering around the roads of Manchester as well. I was holding on in the last miles of that race, and I think, if I remember rightly, there's like a big hill that comes at mile 16 that nearly killed me, but the Meta Speed was always giving back that little bit of extra leg sparing efficiency and energy that you wanted. It really definitely helped me in those final miles. So this is just a cracking shoe. I think it's still one of the best going out there, and I would still go chasing PBs in this if I wasn't testing other shoes. So that's my marathon and 5k PB shoe. However, there is a new shoe in town that just helped me run my fastest ever park run. It's up for debate whether or not you count those as 5k PBs or not, but if you do, technically it's my fastest ever 5k as well. I did a 17:41 in the new Puma Fast R Nitro Elite 3. We're still busy testing this shoe for the channel, going to be doing a marathon in it and all that kind of stuff, but so far this looks to be a cracking shoe. It's not the most natural shoe to run in, and I've almost had to learn a bit to control this kind of decoupled midsole setup you've got with the disappearing kind of heel, the heel cutaway here. Had to find the sweet spot, but when you hit the ground right in this shoe, it feels smooth, fast, efficient, light, punchy. Over that 5k around Gunnersbury Park here in West London, ran like an absolute dream. It was giving me more than I thought it would, even on sometimes kind of on less smooth ground as well. Now I will be using this to chase a fastest marathon time in London this year. So it does feel a bit narrow. There are some things I'm worried about. It feels a bit narrow, which is going to be interesting over the 26.2 in terms of that fit. It's quite long in the toe and quite narrow. I also get a bit of ground impact coming up under the ball of the foot. A bit more ground than I would like, which may or may not be a problem for 3 hours running, but we will find out. But from what I've seen so far in this shoe, in that 5k fast smash around Gunnersbury Park, I'm a fan of what I've found. Now, I set my 10k PB last year as well at the Winter Run in London, which is a run around kind of the city streets of London, sort of one of those classic runs in London where it's twisty-turny. I did it in a shoe you might not ordinarily choose to go hunting your fastest times, but this is a shoe that I love. It's the Hoka Max 6. Now, the Winter 10k, as I said, isn't the easiest course to knock out a PB. It's very twisty and turny. There's lots of people. It's very busy, but I was in pretty good form at the time. I didn't realise it, and I was reaping the rewards of running on feel. I ran entirely on feel, not my watch. And the Max 6 on that day offered up everything I needed and more. It's a shoe that relies a lot on the rockering and responsiveness rather than, I think, a big bouncy kind of energy or a particularly kind of carbon shoe sort of punchy energy that you're going to get. But what I like is that it's quite smooth and natural. It's very easy in the transitions. It's snappy. It's not going to do a lot of the work for you like some carbon racers. If you're going to choose a shoe to go and chase that, you'd probably want a bit more. But I find it gives back everything if you work hard, and there's a control to it, along with good reliable comfort, good reliable landings as well. Kind of just lets you get on with business without really being too aware of what's on your feet. Would I have run faster in a punchier carbon racer on the day of the Winter Run amongst all those people in the crowds? Well, there's every chance, maybe, but I hadn't necessarily expected to be in PB shape. I had this Max 6 as well to test for the channel, so I just put them on and went out and ran as I could on the day. Ran them fresh out of the box too, and what I think it shows is that the Max 6 is a shoe with range and versatility, and I salute that. When it comes to the half marathon PB, I haven't broken that one since 2014. I've got sort of, well, I don't think I've even got close, but I did a 1:22 at the Richmond half. I honestly can't remember what shoes I was wearing. I think maybe it would have been something like the Adidas Adios Boston Boost, if you remember those old Adi races that had a really low stack and thin wedge of boost foam in the old days, where boost foam was probably the kind of premier foam perhaps. In the good old days, they were direct, just enough cushion to cut a bit of the road impact, but not a lot. You had to work in those shoes a bit like you did the Max 6, even more. If you didn't move your feet fast, they'd sort of take a hammering from the ground. So it really encouraged you to sort of be clipping along nice and speedily. Still something that I actually like in a shoe to this day. And my 1 mile PB remains at 5:26 at the moment. That was set at the Strava mile, which was part of the Night of the 10k PBs back in 2018. So getting on for a while ago as well. On that day, I've seen the photo, I was definitely wearing a pair of On shoes. Maybe it was the Cloud Flow or early Cloud Surfers. I can't really remember, but I've not raced a mile since. But it just shows that while shoes can make the difference, they're not the only element in your running that can. They probably wouldn't have been a shoe that you'd pick to go and race a mile. I don't know why I did. I think I was asked there by On, so I was wearing those shoes. But if you're fit enough, you can run a PB in any shoe, right? Finally, for me, then I nailed a big one last year. I went back to the Berlin Wall 100 miler and I knocked around 4 hours off my 100 mile ultra fastest time. That was a year after DNFing in Berlin, which was pretty miserable. I went back to deal with that demon, ended up running 22 hours, 6 minutes and 36 seconds. which I was very, very happy with. I actually used 3 shoes for that. I ran the first 41 miles in the Brooks Hyperion Max 2 on relatively fresh legs. I then switched to the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3 for 20 miles. I did the last 40 miles in the On Cloud Monster Hyper on considerably more tired legs, feet, brain, body, all of that. Now, the 3-shoe strategy worked really well for that race, and it's something that I would totally recommend for anyone thinking about longer ultras. Changing up the ride underfoot, it definitely helped to keep things feeling fresh, change things up. It just felt nice. Cuts out some of that repetition that you can get from, or the problems that can be caused by that from just running the same shoe on the same ground. I got out of this race actually with my feet almost completely intact. I had no blisters, I had no bruised toenails, I had no battered toes. I was actually able to move and walk pretty happily the next day. Now, the Brooks Hyperion Max 2 surprised me the most. It was perhaps a risk going in. I thought this was a shoe that might be a bit too direct, a bit too racy to cope with 6 or 7 hours on feet. I kind of like a more direct shoe, and this shoe did everything that I needed. The standout, really, though, I think was the really light, roomy toe box. It gave that kind of freedom, but it delivered control underfoot, reliable landings. I got smooth transitions. There was a bit of help from the more energetic midsole, but it's not in an overly aggressive way. So it was sort of happy when I was moving. It almost vanished on the foot as well, letting me cruise those first 40 miles in good comfort. Just got on with ticking over, which is what you want to do when you're eating that first chunk. I would have happily kept it on actually, and I very nearly did, but I stuck with the plan, went into the Speed 3 for the next chunk. This was the shoe that I used to run 1,800 miles across Europe, so I thought it would do me a good job. The Speed 3 has a special place in my heart. But for that middle 20 section, I did feel a bit more exposed in it, and despite the bigger stack in the heel on the Speed 3, the wider forefoot platform, all of that, I felt a bit more road coming up, and the foot fatigue was more present in that shoe. So then eventually when I flipped into the On Cloud Monster Hyper, which is one I've actually got here, it proved to be a great long hauler. This had a good balance of cushion. It's not too sinky and sludgy, but it was more protective. Still had good disappearing comfort. You got plenty of room in the toe box as well, which is really important. For ultras, you just want a shoe that's down there taking the edge off the road, sparing the legs a little, delivering a smooth, reliable, consistent, stable ride, no rubbing, no problems. Not too heavy and cumbersome, and I would say the On Cloud Monster Hyper absolutely delivers that. I'm going to be going back to Berlin again this year, so I'm starting to think about which shoes I choose. There's so many good shoes out there, I think it's going to be a tough call. It was a surprise with the On Cloud Monster Hyper because that's not really what this shoe was necessarily designed for, but I think for that kind of run, it did a really admirable job. Whether I go to it again, I don't know. We will see.
So my PB shoes, now not many new PBs have fallen over the past year or so. So some of the shoes I'm going to talk about do kind of refer to some older versions of shoes that you can still buy today. Now, starting with that 5K PB, which is 1959 for me. I have run a faster 5K race since then. I think it was 1939, but it was kind of a closed circuit race, kind of not officially ratified. So I'm going to go with this 1959, which is at the Olympic Park, kind of a run through race that I did with Nick and Tom back in 2023. That was in the Hoka Rocket X2. Very good shoe that you can still buy now, and it was the perfect shoe for that race. It's a shoe that I really like. It's a good shoe at shorter distances. I think I prefer it at shorter distances. It is very responsive, very lively, I think very aggressive in terms of that ride, but also a very controlled shoe to run at that shorter distances. And it just had that pop that I wanted over that 5K, that my 5K kind of race pace, and it worked very nicely for me in that race. I think looking at 10K distance, going back a little bit further, so 2021, that was 39.39, still the only time I've run kind of sub 40 for the 10K. That was the Hoka Rocket X, so a very, an older version of the Rocket shoe. First time I've run in a carbon and raced in a carbon racing shoe, and I got a very good experience from it. What I liked about the shoe, I love the fact it was a very light shoe. It's a very narrow, skinny fitting shoe, but it worked very nicely for me. It's responsive. It was, that kind of carbon feel, that first kind of fun carbon experience for me worked really well. And, Olympic Park, again, it's a course you can run hard. It's pretty flat. And that 10K distance, it worked very well for me. Would it be the shoe that I'd run for 10K or use for 10K races now? Not really. I think there's better shoes in Hoka's range and other shoes, but I think at that time it worked, exceptionally well for me in that race. Going up to half marathon distance, again, going back slightly, I did 1:27 at London Landmarks half. That was in 2022. That was in the Asics Meta Speed Sky, the very first version of it. Now, I really liked the, straight out of the door, the first Asics Metaspeed Sky. I think Asics got a lot of things right with that shoe. And I really liked it at the half marathon, marathon distance. And I think that's really where it excelled. It is very aggressive. It's very bouncy, like everything I want in a carbon racing shoe. And that half marathon distance, a landmarks half, is a course where a bit twisty and turny, but definitely are some nice kind of straight bits, kind of really kind of attack. The Metaspeed Sky worked really well for me, and I had some good runs, I remember, prior to that race before kind of testing it, and it really worked well for me in that kind of half marathon. So that's 1:27, the London landmarks half, and then getting into the marathon PB, and that is 3:24, and that was in 2022 as well. I think just before London landmarks, or around that time, and again it was in the Asics Metaspeed Sky. That was at Brighton Marathon. That was after the kind of Bilbao debacle that we all experienced. And this was kind of my opportunity to take all that training I'd done for Bilbao, really kind of put it towards and kind of racing towards my PB at Brighton Marathon. And this is a shoe, again, it worked very well for me. I think what this shoe showed me is that the changes that Asics has made to the more recent version of the Metaspeed Sky is what I wanted to see. I think when I started to tire, started to find it a little bit tougher, the shoe felt a little bit more difficult to run in. When it felt good and had long stretches, it was absolutely perfect. But those changes with the Metaspeed Sky Paris compared to that version of the Metaspeed Sky just makes it a better long distance racer. I think had I had that shoe for that race, I think I would have probably felt more comfortable and probably would have run a little bit faster at that kind of, where I was struggling a little bit. But yeah, 3:24 is my kind of marathon PB in the Asics Metaspeed Sky. Would I use that shoe for my marathon PB now? No, I'd probably be using the kind of newer version. There'll probably be other shoes I'd be kind of picking over it as well. But at that time, it worked well for me and got me a very nice kind of marathon PB after slightly traumatic experience out in Bilbao.
So 5k PB first for me, and this is not a race I tend to target as much. I'm usually going for marathons, but I did have a real go at it a few years ago and set my PB at a Friday night under lights event around 15:30 in the Nike Vaporfly 2, which is still a lot of people's favourite carbon plate racing shoe. They like it more than the newer Vaporfly models. It's certainly a very fast option for 5k, really lightweight, a bit firmer and more direct than lots of shoes out there. I think now we are seeing a trend for really lightweight carbon plate shoes coming in, and I do think those will probably be even better 5k options. Like, I haven't really, like I say, gone after that 5k PB in a few years, but I have run a couple of sub-16 park runs, most recently today in the Puma Faster Nitro Elite 3, which is a fantastic lightweight shoe, much lighter even than something like the Vaporfly. So I do think there's a trend towards more lightweight shoes, and I do think that's really going to favour the 5k distance in the future. Even the newest Vaporfly 4 is all designed to be very lightweight and really good for those short events. So I do think we've now got a really nice selection of 5k carbon shoes. I think maybe in the past there was a little bit more tendency to put in loads of cushion and make them really bouncy and marathon focused. I think nowadays there's some really nice 5k shoes out there. Vaporfly 2 remains a very good option for that, but I think things like the Metaspeed Sky Paris, Puma Faster Nitro Elite 3, Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3 and the new Vaporfly 4 all look great for 5k in particular. On to the 10k next, and this is a slightly odd one for me because I did run my two fastest 10ks in the back end of last year while training for the Valencia Marathon, the fastest of which was 31:33 in the Nike Alphafly 3. This was at the River Ness 5k though, which has a downhill course, so it is on power of 10 with a little A next to it for those who know what that means, but it just means there's a certain amount of overall net downhill in the course. So it was my fastest time, but it wouldn't be a world record eligible course, put it that way, but it would be eligible for personal best. But I think I'd probably take the time around a little bit later in October in the Paris 10k, which is not a particularly fast course, quite twisting. I ran 32:16 in the Hoka Rocket X2. But of surprises, I wasn't really feeling it that day. I turned up, I had a t-shirt on, I was feeling pretty relaxed and just went out, and the first 5k was very fast and I held on from there. So that's probably more my official 10k PB. I think that was one of my oldest PBs as well. Again, it's a race I haven't really gone after and struggled with at times, but I did run kind of 32:32 I think back in the original Asics Metaspeed Sky. I think it was that long ago now, but again, as mentioned in the 5k section, there's lots of really nice lightweight full stack carbon shoes out there now that are perfect for the 10k. The Rocket X2, I think it's a pretty good carbon shoe. I wouldn't put it in my top tier of racing shoes, but it certainly delivered that day, and even especially as it was a slippery day and it's not got the best grip. So a really good good shoe. Alphafly 3, shows that even though that is a more marathon focused shoe, it really can handle those short distances because it's still lightweight, it's still really propulsive. We've seen loads of amazing elite times in the Alphafly 3. So even now Nike is separating the Vaporfly and the Alphafly, with the lighter, lower stack Vaporfly being for shorter events. I'm sure it's going to be amazing for those. And then the Alphafly 3 as more the marathon racer. A lot of crossover. They're still great for every distance. But 10K, definitely a race I want to try and improve that PB at some point and really go after it, try and get another sub 32 if possible on a more flat course maybe. Half marathon next, and this is a race I've targeted much more than the 5K and 10K. I spent years trying to go sub 70 and I finally did it last year in the build up to the Valencia Marathon. I did it in the Asics Meta Speed Sky Paris. My favourite racing shoe of all time. Going to talk more about it in the marathon section of this video, but yeah, super lightweight but still full stack, comfortable cushion, really propulsive, really bouncy. Like, I find it cushioned enough for any distance. Some might find it better for shorter races, but certainly great for half marathon. I was running laps of Battersea Park for that half marathon, which was a little bit soul destroying. I was running pretty much by myself. I was running with a massive crowd of people, but fortunately they weren't running with me in a group. The leaders had gone on a bit ahead, so it was very much a full time trial. So to run that time I was really happy with, finally get the sub 70 off my back. But there's a little bit of an extra story to this half marathon PB, which is my best half marathon race was not the Battersea Park half. It was the Pleshy half marathon in Essex, a fantastic event, the Essex Half Marathon Championships. I ran a little bit before that race and I was on for my first sub 70. I was running in the On Cloudboom Strike LS, which is an expensive shoe. It's one that probably isn't going to feature as one of our top picks all the time because it's got that upper with no laces, which is sometimes a bit of a concern. It's very expensive, but I do think it's a fantastic shoe. I think it's quite similar to the Meta Speed Sky Paris all round in terms of being really lightweight, responsive and fast without necessarily being the most squishy and that kind of thing underfoot. And in that race, I think I had about 20 seconds in hand going past the 12-mile marker. So I had to run I think a 5:40 last mile basically to make sure I got the sub 70. But at the very last corner, we were sent the wrong way and I ended up with a 68.58 for a half marathon that was 160 metres short. So that might well have been my half marathon PB. I probably wouldn't have done Battersea if I'd done it there, put it that way. And so yeah, the Cloudboom Strike LS is a shoe I think deserves a shout out as an excellent carbon plate shoe, but it's not one that, like I say, we recommend a lot because I do think it's quite similar to the Meta Speed Sky Paris, but I prefer the Asics, and the Asics is a lot cheaper, more accessible with the normal laces and stuff like that. But yeah, certainly a great shoe as well. And then onto the marathon, and my marathon PB is in the Asics Meta Speed Sky Paris at the Seville Marathon earlier this year, and I also set my previous PB in the Meta Speed Sky Paris at London last year. So I did 2:27 at London, 2:25 at Seville, and yeah, I think this is a phenomenal racing shoe. I think it's the best shoe on the market for me. It's got such a fast turnover, a really springy, engaging plate under the forefoot that I get a little bit more back from than with the Metaspeed Edge Paris, for example. And it's just that full package of lightweight, but propulsive and fast and comfortable enough and cushioned enough for the marathon. And there are more shoes now going after this design, I think. And I think there will be in general a trend to make shoes a little bit lighter, which just works really well for me as a high cadence runner. And I'm not going to use it at the London Marathon next weekend just because I've done 2 PBs in it. I still think it's the best racing shoe on the market, but I'm going to try and do a PB in another shoe. But for now, my top marathon race, my top racer for any distance is the Asics Meta Speed Sky Paris, and that's the one I'd get if you're just looking for one shoe to PB across every distance, because I do think it works really well for any, like I say, it's really lightweight, perfect for 5Ks. The marathons, if you wanted a more cushioned option, I think things like the Alphafly certainly are amazing options for that distance. But the Meta Speed Sky Paris has been my go-to shoe for races where I've really prepped and gone after a time with the half marathon and the Seville and London marathons, and it's never let me down. So yeah, it's still my top racing option.